If there is only one thing you need to learn and understand about Magna Carta 1215, it's this. Magna Carta 1215 is the sole peaceful means known to humankind by which the rights of the weakest, most innocent citizens can prevail over a massive, potentially corrupt, and oppressive state power. This is the voice of freedom. Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre. Welcome to your next lesson with hosts Fitzroy and Carl. Hello, folks. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you along for our lesson number 15 in our Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre series. Fitz joins me again this evening. Good to have you aboard, Fitz. Looking forward to tonight's show. We should get into a little bit of housekeeping before we get into it. Our big bit of housekeeping, I guess, mate, is this news. We are coming to Singleton. What a great flyer Cherie has put together for the event coming up to Singleton. Now, we're coming to the Cali on the 5th to the 9th of September. We'll do a live show, a normal Monday night live show from the Cali with a whole bunch of locals who've got a lot of stories to tell down there, apparently. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of what's been going on and what they've been doing to combat it. Fitz, they've been using, they've been asserting their rights, I think is the best way of explaining what's going on down there, don't you think?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Yes, absolutely. They've actually got a culture of where they work together in unity. And that's the most important thing. That means that there's a trust that exists amongst the people there. And now that they've got that culture going of trust, they've got a really solid foundation from which to launch and actually become an effective force to counter all the criminality that they're enduring.
Yeah, they've certainly, had a fair bit of that to endure for sure. We're going to find out a bit about it. So that'll be our Monday night show. But for the first time, we're actually coming into town for a week. Are you going to have a voice? What is everybody else that you work with around the world going to do without you for this time?
Yeah, good point. I'm going to be doing a fair bit of talking.
You will be.
But it'll be worth it because at the end of the day, there's going to be knowledge imparted. And as you know, the old saying goes, knowledge is power. And so if they've got the motivation already to unite as a community, the knowledge is just the part that's been missing. And I'm more than happy to be part of that and give them the infrastructure, how they can actually go and act on this knowledge.
Awesome stuff. So we're going to do 2 sessions a day because in Singleton, there are people who are day and night shifting quite large portions of the community. So some people won't be able to make it to one, will be able to make it to the other. We are doing the same thing in both lessons on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and the Thursday. These shows will not be going out live. I will record them, but they will not be going out live. We might post them at a later date, but they are simply for the people who want to turn up in Singleton and get this education in hand. And I believe there's quite a few turning up. So Tuesday, 1 till 3, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 1 till 3, and the same lesson again, 7:30 till 9:30 that night. And we won't be streaming those live. I will be doing a show concurrently with that. So we're going to have all sorts of whiz-bang technology going out. Fitz will be looking after himself. I'll be looking after myself, and somebody will be looking after all of us, I hope. So with a bit of luck, it'll all come together. But that's the week. If you'd like to come along to the Cali, then by all means, you can see the details here. More information is available by calling Cherie. She's the event coordinator. Bottom right-hand corner of the screen, folks. You'll find her phone number, 0413 081 224. You will need to let her know if you are coming or not, because they've only got limited seating. It's not the world's hugest pub, so limited seating, and you're going to want to take some notes and bring along a USB key with you, capable of being plugged into a Windows machine. Look, I'll have a Mac there too, probably. So we'll figure it out one way or the other. But there will be lots of documentation you'll be able to take home and download and put on your USB key and access and that sort of stuff. So, or at least I think that's the plan, isn't it, Fitz?
Yeah, like the idea is that the knowledge that gets imparted will actually be something that can be kept by each individual that shows up, so they can have it as a reference, because obviously you can only learn so much in a short period of time, so then they can refer back to it. Plus, they'll have the tools that they require to actually action that knowledge, and then they can actually be an effective force because they'll have their own place to draw those references from when they require, and that'll all be explained. And we'll work on getting a culture together of how they can support each other to actually get this done. So really excited about that.
Yeah, very excited. Now, the other bit of exciting news is the VOFHQ website has gone live. The not so exciting part of it is that we haven't filled it with anything yet, but we will. And we will do so in the coming days. We're still setting up different pages, different things like that. But I can tell you right now that if you have a question about the shows or about Magna Carta 1215, now Fitz has his own email address. How exciting. Fitz at vofhq.com, FOTZ at vofhq.com. I'm Carl at vofhq.com. There'll be a few others that we'll pop up with in the not too distant future, and certainly if you've got some information for us, we'll have a website for that or an email address for that too. I'm trying to break all these websites up or these email addresses up so that it makes it a bit easier to track what's going on, because at the moment I've got 357 emails that I've got to try and figure out what to do with. And it's almost at a point where it's overwhelming. However, my daughter has stepped up today and offered to help, so really looking forward to looking at her reaction when she reads some of the stuff in those emails. I think, Fitz, that's going to be the most interesting thing to begin with.
I just spotted a comment that's worth responding to. So Lexel01 says, why not actually place this info on your website so people can just download the PDF files? That's actually what the plan is. So it's just what I was talking
about. So the website went live. The website went live to a point this morning at like 8 o'clock. We've been figuring out wrinkles through it throughout the day. And making sure that email links work and that kind of thing. Now, pages are being created as we speak, and over the next 2 or 3 days, once I gain access to be able to upload stuff into the back end, and Fitz gains access to the back end, we will start uploading just that, documents, videos. I think you'll find that this show and every one of my most recent shows will upload directly to the website and be on the main page, so you won't have to go looking for the latest show on any YouTube channel or Project Matilda or anywhere else. You just come to VOFHQ and it should be there. We are, as I say, still working on it, and this is the first time I've ever had anything to do with building a web page, so we're probably going to get stuff wrong. We're going to screw things up, and it's going to take a little while to get it right. I ask your forgiveness. I ask your patience with us, because we do want to get this right for everybody. So we want to make it easy for you. We want to make it easy for us. And most of all, we want to make it easy for you to get the information that we're trying to impart. So yes, that will all play a big part of all of that. All right. I think I've probably spoken enough already, Fitz. Should we get into it for the night?
Yeah, let's do it. It's a pretty big full-on show coming. So yeah, why not get cracking? It's definitely going to go over an hour, guys. I'm just hoping it doesn't go too much over an hour, but yeah, it's definitely going to go over an hour. So hope you've given yourself a bit extra time tonight, because it's going to be worth every minute of it, especially towards the end.
All right, let's get into this. Citizens often focus on the personal histories of the villains of authoritarianism instead of the factors in their respective societies which made their rise possible. Sam Orwell from Dusk of Liberty.
Yeah, so when I put this up in the past, people go, I wonder if there's any relation to George Orwell. I don't know the answer to that. If there's anyone else who does, please let us know in the chat. So the reason why I've got this one first is that we're all very good at looking outward at the problem exists outside of ourselves. But really, the truth is that if we ourselves aren't honest with ourselves, then this situation that we live in is going to keep continuing. And so it takes that level of real personal responsibility, instead of looking at, bad people only show up because they're bad, as opposed to, well, don't the conditions need to exist for them to actually, show up? That's what's really about what we're going to look at tonight, and what those conditions are and how they're actually being put into place.
Fabulous. To the next one. Now, Lysander Spooner is somebody we quote pretty regularly here. Taxation and trial by jury, he speaks of here. All legitimate government is a mutual insurance company, voluntarily agreed upon by the parties to it for the protection of their rights against wrongdoers. In its voluntary character, it is precisely similar to an association for mutual protection against fire or a shipwreck.
So last week, I remember we finished on this one, and I didn't get a chance to really elaborate on what that means. And I remember when you read it for the first time, you had to read it again because it really grabbed your attention. Like, what?
Absolutely,
Government's
yeah.
a mutual insurance company. I got to know more about that. So I just thought, why not get into, starting here where we left off, and let's give this a bit more depth as to what does that mean to say that government is a mutual insurance company, voluntarily agreed upon by the parties to it for the protection of their rights against wrongdoers. But that's really critical.
Yeah.
Really critical to understand that that's the only real true need we need from government, aside from that part of the infrastructure control. But as far as like living free, the only time we need them to actually use any kind of force is in that protection from those who would instigate harm on another. That's pretty much when we need them in that capacity. Outside of that, we don't need them for any other form of control. That's it. So we're going to go into why that is.
The Constitution, a rule book for the state that is a one-sided contract that binds and constrains officers of the state, but not the people, other than to behave within the parameters deemed acceptable by the collective conscience of the community as a means of preserving the traditions, customs and rules the people already live by, so the people remain free within their natural state of natural justice.
So I know we've covered this before, and if you've been watching these series, this is going to be very familiar to you. I just wanted to go over it in the context of the previous slide about how government is a mutual insurance company. So if you dig down into the heart of what's written here, it says that it's a one-sided contract that binds and constrains officers of the state. So they now are in a place where they have some kind of privilege, right, to be in that role. And the only way they can be in that privilege is if there's a contract that says what they cannot do and what the consequences for them doing that are, right? That's what the purpose of it is. And the only way that they would ever move against us, we the people, is by our insistence. And so why would we insist that government moves against another member of the community? Only if they've stepped outside the boundary of what the community deems acceptable. Because if people are stepping outside that boundary without any consequence, well, we can't be free because we're always in this high state of alert about, us being violated all the time. So I'm hoping that gives a little bit of context to what it means by that statement of a mutual insurance company.
You skipped over something I think is fairly important at the front of that. When you were talking about the Constitution, we are talking about Magna Carta 1215 Constitution here. You said that the contract that is written in a way that says what isn't acceptable and the consequences for that. Whereas today's contract law is exactly the opposite. A contract is written with the bounds of what is acceptable, and you step outside of those bounds of what's acceptable, that's when you're going to run into an issue with their contract law. Is that a fair way of looking at it? It has been reversed?
Yeah, it's inverted. I just love that you actually did the work for me, Carl. That's awesome. Because that means that, it's landing. Because how in the past I've spoken about how negative rights versus positive rights. You've just explained the difference between negative rights and positive rights right there. Is because if someone's writing something in a way of what you're allowed to do, and then the consequences for, what happens if you step outside of that, that is positive rights, which is legal. And that's the mind trick that we're under. So yes, you made a very clear and very important distinction there. So I'm really pleased you did that.
So am I. Bit surprised too, if just between you and me. All right, let's move on. Article 39. This is one of the articles that was removed by that Catholic Betterfield post. I'm sorry. I'm just getting carried away.
You almost got Tourette's on that one.
I do almost have Tourette's when it comes to the Vatican and the popes. Yes, I do. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals or by the law of the land.
So again, just to reaffirm what's been said in the last two slides, right? So government is a mutual insurance company, right? Virtually, if you want to look at it that way. And all we require them to do is what? We don't require them to come after us or imprison us or strip us or do any of those things that violate us, only if we insist. And the only way we would insist is because that is what the conscience of the collective community deems unacceptable. And how do we deem that? We had an agreement: no loss, no harm, no breaching of the peace, and no fraud. That's it. That's our agreement of how we can live cohesively. And so that's the only reason we would need the government to perform a function on our behalf. That's it. Nothing else, which is what we call the law of the land. So that is how they are that insurance company. They're an insurance, about knowing that we can have justice served and that they're going to perform a function in that. That's it. That's when it comes to our freedoms, that's all we require for them. Infrastructure and all the other things, that's a separate matter. That's what legislation's for. But to use legislation to control us, that is them stepping outside the boundary. And so you will not find this in what these other places that believe that we have constitutions will come and espouse, right? You will not find anything that remotely sounds like this or has these limits of what government cannot do. So remember, when you read the word we is government. That's what we means. So it says, nor will we proceed with force against him, right? So we will not do these things unless the community deems it necessary. That's the only way we'll do it. They're the strict conditions that we operate under for us to have the legitimate grant of authority that the people grant us. That's what that's saying.
So just now I want to reiterate to the people who would be watching this and believe in 1297 and believe that Magna Carta 1297 is an updated version of Magna Carta 1215, or that it was otherwise, it became superior to Magna Carta 1215. This article, Article 39, was removed by the Pope, who had no right to rewrite an English constitution. Ask yourself, if Magna Carta 1297 was really legitimate, why would the Pope want to remove Article 39? Because and it reads that way. Because if you were to leave Article 39 in there, that means they can't come and arrest you. You can't have your rights stripped from you, your possessions taken from you by a sheriff. You can't be outlawed in society. You can't be exiled from your place, as some people have experienced. You can't be deprived of standing in your community, and they cannot use force against you. All the things that our police force now can do anytime they like. Is that fair?
I mean, I'm sitting back enjoying it. I've got the biggest smile on my face right now.
So just ask yourself, when somebody says, "Oh, bloody, Magna Carta 1215, it was upgraded, it had to be given a bit of a makeover." Well, between 1215 and 1297, things changed so much that the bastard Pope decided to remove this Article 39. He removed a number of others, 61 being among them. We'll get to the rest of them. But every time we get to one, ask yourself, why would a Catholic Pope want to remove this particular article from Magna Carta 1215 and tell the people it doesn't exist anymore? It's just a question worth asking, I would have thought. I'll shut up now. Sorry.
I'm just looking at a question here. No, that's fine. I just wanted to look at a question here. It says by Danny, so the law of the land, I think that's meant to say is common law. Correct. Yes, and not the legislation that they call laws. You've got it right in one, my friend. You've nailed it. So I'm pleased it's landing. So that's absolutely correct.
Excellent. All right. Causal factors. The stimulant, erased knowledge. The outcome, confusion. Superstitious beliefs are the stimulant. The outcome, instant gratification. Disassociation and disidentification are stimulants. Slavery and violence are the outcome.
Yeah, so this is going back to that first meme that was up there. Like, how does, someone like a Hitler, as you can see, obviously that's who that was in that image. How does someone like a Hitler come into a place where people are willingly, open to accepting that as a form of authority? Like, what's got to happen, right? And so we got to look at the causal factors here, right? So there has to be a stimulant that starts that all, because we inherently have a capacity for giving from the heart, right? So how do we lose our capacity to access that? Well, we need to lose knowledge of that. That has to be taken from us. So the only way to do that is to hide it. And once you hide the knowledge that you require to actually, understand yourself, your environment, those around you, then you've got a vacuum, right? And so then you're living in a state of confusion, because your world isn't lining up the way you inherently understand it. It's not being explained to you the same way as you inherit. So now you're in confusion. And then what happens? Well, there's a gap. And so you need to get people to work in concert with one another. Well, you can't have them creating their own beliefs. That's not going to work out. So if you're running a control structure, you need to manufacture the belief. And you have to do a really good job at it in order for there to be such a massive uptake, right? And what do? You appeal to people's base desires, not their needs, their base desires. And what's one of the base desires? Instant gratification. And that is so prevalent, right? Otherwise, addictions, all the sort of, like shopping, people have got shopping afflictions, they've got to go shopping and medicate that way, or they, need to drink a lot, or, they need to gamble, or, there's just a whole,
drugs,
you list it.
Self-medicate. Yep.
Absolutely. Like some people just fully just numb out and play video games, right? They just totally tune out and they go into this unrealistic world.
It's not a bad career. If you're any good at it, not a bad career playing video games.
However,
just between you and the gatepost.
At the same time, you're having a digitalized version, you know what I mean? You're not having a real contact version of reality. And so you're missing on that real, one-on-one exchange that we actually require, because we require touch. They've done studies that if you rear a child without touch, it stunts its growth. It needs touch.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So we need that. Right? And so how do you get people to disassociate themselves from their needs? So you need to create this. It's really important to create this false, idea of perfection and idealism and things that really people want, where they don't. They're just confusing what they think they want. And it has to be very seductive. And so then once you do that, then you've got this place of being disassociated from yourself. And once you're disassociated from yourself, then you're going to be disassociated from everyone else. And only then, when you disidentify with the other, only then can you commit the most heinous acts of violence against them.
Yeah.
And that's the society we've been living under for thousands of years. Otherwise, we'd never have wars. They wouldn't have existed ever. We wouldn't have had poverty. We wouldn't have had slavery. We wouldn't have had famine. None of those things would have existed.
So true. Verily the lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul, and then walks grinning in the funeral.
So like I said, remember what I just said earlier about self-indulgence? Well, that's the lust for comfort, right? And once you activate that inside people, that's when the soul dies. And like it says, it walks grimly to the funeral. Like the comfort is just, it's all absorbing. People are all absorbing their comfort. I mean, let's go back to the whole, spicy dart. I think I was calling it the juicy dart. But I actually like your version better. We call it the spicy dart.
I think either one works well. We both deserve a
medal. What was that about? That was about people not wanting to lose a level of comfort that they've come accustomed to. So they did whatever it took to make sure that they could keep that level of comfort, or the illusion of it anyway, more so than the actuality. Because if they really did have that same level of comfort, they never would have been going through these, people were traumatized, no matter what level they believed it at, right? Their feelings were the same. They still felt anxious, they were afraid, so they still had the feelings that were being activated. They just were misdirected. That's the true nature of how it works. And it was all in the service of comfort, right? Self, that self is the most important. That, that instant gratification. I must relieve myself of the fear of I'm going to lose these comforts. So I do.
And this happens with this happens with everything new. Australia is one of the biggest countries with first uptake of new technology, for instance. There's a reason that Samsung and Apple open their stores here first for orders, because we will jump on new phones, new technology, new anything, new fridges. If you can plug it into the internet and it'll work from the toilet, you want to have a go on it. It's amazing the technology that we want, and we want it now. And look, I'm not one to talk about owning houses and buying houses or aspiring for even buying houses. But back in the day, people used to buy, when they got married, a small house, maybe 2 bedrooms or 1 or 2 bedroom place. Then, as they worked and grew, they decided to grow a family. Quite often, the mother stops working. They needed a bigger house. They'd get a 3 bedroom, so the baby had a room. These days, young couples want a 4 bedroom house with a 2-car garage and half an acre in the backyard. We want to start out basically where our parents ended up. Is this a symptom of what you've just described here, our lust for comfort?
Yeah, and it's also manufactured. It's not
Yeah.
actually innate. It's that, keeping up with the Joneses. That's all manufactured. That your worth is now somehow attached to your possessions, right? And how big they are and how many you have. Like that's the trick. And if we want to belong, right? We have an innate need to belong and feel accepted. Well, then the only way that society shows us we're going to be accepted is if we can keep up with the Joneses. So it's a really clever manipulation of our base needs to make sure that we stay attached to slavery. That's really, really cleverly done.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Unfortunately, most people are not able to catch it.
The greater part of the population is not very intelligent, dreads responsibility, and desires nothing better than to be told what to do, provided the rulers do not interfere with its material comforts and its cherished beliefs. It's perfectly happy to let itself be ruled. Now, let's just view that in the context of football. All right, NRL or AFL football. I'm not talking about the intelligence levels there. I'm talking about what you don't want to be messed around with. People won't let you mess with your football. They will not like you messing with grog in Australia. Do not mess with the price of beer, because all of a sudden you'll get a very vocal population rising up. I don't know if it happened down in your part of the world, Fitz, but recently there were noises here about, I think a schooner now costs somewhere in the vicinity of $15 in some places, $15 or $16 for a schooner. And the price of beer is only getting higher. People are starting to scream because, as far as Queenslanders are concerned, beer is an essential service, and you don't go messing with that. So we might see some backing off on things like that. But it's quite right. As long as you don't mess with the things we really love that are close to us, you can do whatever you like.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say about this quote that I'm of the leaning that Aldous Huxley was part of the inner circle. And on the surface, if you look at it, this just looks like, oh yeah, this is just how people are. This is our human nature. But I'm starting to move into the space where this was all deliberate to actually coach people into believing that's what they're like, more so than an actual statement of fact. And these are these very subtle ways, because once you put ideas out, right, people start to attach to them and they start actually going, oh yeah, I can see that. That's just how we are. Yet what's missed in all of this is that this is all manufactured. And this is what the point of tonight's show is, to show how it gets manufactured. So some of these quotes I've put in just to sort of reiterate that it's not our natural state. This is our programmed state. And that takes a lot of time and energy, because if you are running a deception, you have to put a ton of energy into maintaining it. And that's why all the institutions have been captured. There is not one institution you can go to that's not captured and controlled that gives you this same message. It doesn't exist. That's the sheer scale of the operation that's been running. And that's why majority of people would never see it.
And if you think about it, when this was released, back in the 20s or 30s or 40s or 40s probably, but judging by the look of the photo, I would suggest that this is the forerunner of what we see today in our newspapers. This is somebody with a no byline story dropping a page on, a front page on one of the big mainstream media news outlets, purporting to give information that sounds, true, reasoned, researched, but in effect is just opinion, and they're trying to get, like you say, people to attach to it and run with it. And now, of course, they have the aid of the bots through social media that they can program to get behind it and push it on those platforms. And that's how these things gain traction. There's no reality to it.
Well, it comes down to what people are willing to accept. And because people don't want to stand out, you know what I mean? They don't want to be the one where all the attention's focused on them. That level of pressure that they feel helps them accept it, because they're really running from a fear of what will happen to them if they stand in their, in opposition to what the norm wants. And so then you've got every single individual operating like that. There's like this massive illusion that, well, my neighbor won't think like that, so I better think like them. Do you know what I mean? But it's not actually reality, but because we don't know how to be honest with each other, right? Because that's not a way that we operate. Well, no one's actually going to come out and have that honest conversation. Like, is that what you really believe? Because they're in fear of what they're going to get when they ask that question. So out of that limiting factor, this is how it's all done. It's done on that factor that people are just too afraid to stand out and really say what's really happening. Yet at the same time, you think about any group meeting you've ever been, and someone just shows up and they just say what it is that they're feeling, you know what I mean, and their gut instinct, and it grabs everyone's attention.
Yeah.
So, we've all had that experience, that there is every so often someone shows up who has that level of courage and they love it, but then they don't emulate it.
That's right. You've got to live it too, don't you? And it's not easy. Not easy at all. Satanism, from the Hebrew word Hasatan, meaning one who is an adversary or one who opposes the true order of the universe. To oppose natural order is to act against the laws put in place by a higher form of intelligence than man, in order to rule over all life forms on this planet.
So I wanted to give some real context, because we're about to see a video by Mark Passio. There's 3 aspects that I needed to cut down into under 10 minutes, because obviously you won't be able to play it. And so I wanted to give a bit of background, because he's going to talk about this and give a really good explanation, better than I could. So I thought, why do I want to trip over my words? Someone's already done it, right? So the word, he's going to use Satan. So I've heard 2 ways that it's been expressed, Satan and Hashatan.
Right.
And I've heard him say it in 2 different ways too. So the one you're going to hear him say is Satan, I think, something like that. And it's talking, once you understand that there's a construct of what we've come to believe Satanism is, and that's, the devil with the horns and the goatee and the pitchfork and the red tail and all that stuff, right? And then the whole bloodletting and etc. That's just a Hollywood stylized idea that they've sold. There's more to it than that. I'm not saying that doesn't exist as part of it, but at its core, that's not even close to what it is.
Right. Okay. And we're about to learn what it is at its core.
Yep. So these are the 4 tenets that we've gone over before, but in the video that's coming, Mark's going to actually explain every single one of these 4 really, really well. So there's no confusion of how it actually makes sense of what Satanism is. And then if you can understand it, you'll be able to see it in action in every aspect of your life. And if you can't recognize those things, you won't know how to actually deal with it. So this is about drawing it to your awareness, like taking it out of the shadows and putting it into the light. This is what this is about. Like, you need to know what it is that you're looking at before you can actually, you need to fully understand it, like completely, before you can actually work out how you're going to deal with it. So it's about accepting what is there in front of you as it is, not for how you've been trained to believe it is, but actually as it is.
Yep. Sure. All right, let's get into it. I'll pull that down and hit the button.
Look at at our society around us and how it has completely changed, how they have actually propagated the satanic ideology through the mass media, through the mass conditioning of human beings. You know, I mean, maybe this is a good time to get into what their overarching ideology really is, because again, many people hear Satanism and they just think, you know, teenagers going out and lighting fires in the woods and sacrificing animals, you know, these satanic, quote, dabblers is what they think of as Satanism. The really Hollywood kind of propaganded notion of what Satanism is.
As opposed to the idea of role and gender reversals, as opposed to the idea of an anti-humanist philosophy, right?
That's right.
It's the fundamental base of Satanism. And so, you know, slavery and the nature of empires and debt slavery, for example, is satanic. And, you know, basically the policy of exterminating half the world's population because there's
Eugenics,
too many people,
yes.
That's satanic. And yet we don't use those words. So
see, it's because people really haven't looked into what the ideology is. And, you know, if I had to really reword it, I would call it simply selfishnessism, okay, for lack of a better term. It's ultimately, if I had to compress the ideology of Satanism down to one basic way of looking at the world, it's that I come first before everything else, and I don't care who else suffers, as long as it's not affecting me. That's Satanism. That is Satanism to a T. That is Satanism in a nutshell. It is a me, selfish worldview, self-centered worldview, service to self only worldview, where everybody, the people involved in this ideology, from the minute they wake up to the minute they fall asleep at night, okay, are only focused on what they can do for themselves, and they don't care about the suffering or the injustices that anyone else in the world goes through. Well, that's what they want out there in society.
The I generation. The whole concept of this, you know, the iPod, the iMac. I mean, it may have been a pun, but very much symbolically interesting. The fact that the apple was chosen.
That's right.
Right, as the image for Macintosh, right? Because what is the apple? It was given by the so-called devil, according to the biblical theology.
The whole idea that, you know, it was originally the I was originally intended to mean internet when the first iMac came out, but it is very symbolically interesting, almost synchromistic, if you will, that you know, this has been the basis of a very ego-driven society that has really it hasn't really united people. All of this technology has kind of driven a wedge between people socially, if you ask me. But to go back to what these overarching tenets of Satanism was, it would be kind of illuminating for people to really understand what this ideology is about, because once you understand what it's about, you'll see how prevalent it is in our modern society. It's everywhere. They've turned society into a satanic culture, in effect.
Right.
So the first tenet is that the self comes before everything else. And self-preservation is the highest aspiration of humanity. Now, does that mean, you know, we should not have any interest in self-preservation or survival? No, of course not. That's what the biological functions of all human beings is to survive, thrive, propagate, you know, etc. There's nothing wrong with those things. They're part of the natural process. What this is about is that process taken to a completely ego-driven, you know, on steroids type effect. It's, again, as I laid out, only caring about the self, not caring about what goes on in any kind of a wider sense. And it puts self-preservation on a pedestal above everything else, most of all, including morality. It puts it on a pedestal up above, you know, caring about what's right or wrong at all. If it's good for you, it's good, do it. If it's bad for you, and it, you know,
do what thou wilt is the whole of the law.
Exactly, but without the caveat after that of love is the law, love under will.
Right.
You know, that's separated from Satanism. It's just do what thou wilt, period, and don't get caught doing it. You know, if it harms somebody else, and, you know, other people might come after you and want kind of, you know, retribution or anything like that as a result of what you did to them to get ahead. Right. You know, it just says go and get ahead, do whatever you have to, no matter who you really have to step on to get where you want to be. And that's the dog-eat-dog world that we see in our modern culture. We see people who don't care about other people. We see people who are cutthroat, are ruthless, will do anything to get ahead, will stab a knife in anybody's back for, you know, the little modicum of pushing themselves forward to the level that they want to be at in society. And that's the ego-driven notion that Satanism is ultimately about. It's about the pure worship of the self. And there is absolutely no true standards of morality, which brings us to the second tenet or principle of Satanism, and that is moral relativism. Moral relativism is the belief that there is no such thing as an objective standard of right and wrong behavior that exists in nature, that these are human invented constructs that mankind gets to make up and be the arbiter of what is right and what is wrong. And again, in Satanism, essentially, it's like what is right for me is what is right behavior, and what is wrong for me is what is wrong behavior that I shouldn't engage in. It has nothing to do whether someone else or another being is harmed or injured in any way.
Right.
It only has to do with the self, which is, again, in keeping with this me mentality, this very selfish, ego-oriented mentality.
Well, there's no heart-based consciousness, the idea of, the feelings or emotions of others, and also even our own feelings and emotions. They say the Satanist detaches from the heart, right? The whole point.
Well, not entirely, because they care about themselves and their own. So, but anybody that stands in the way of the self and your own, whoever can help you achieve what you want to achieve, they're basically treated without any emotion whatsoever. So, they do have a form of what I call dark care. They very much care about their agendas. They care about what they want to put into effect in the world. They care about who can help them do that, how they can go about doing that. You could look at it as very, very focused willpower and intent. I call it dark care.
Sociopathic, basically.
Exactly. So, moral relativism feeds very nicely into the third and fourth tenets of Satanism. Because if you're only really focused on yourself and you don't believe there's any objective right or wrong behavior, invariably you're going to slip into this ideology, and society is going to slip into this ideology known as social Darwinism. And most people out there really are social Darwinists. Social Darwinism is this extension of Darwinian macrobiological evolutionary theory that basically states that since in the animal kingdom, Darwinism postulates that there's the survival of the fittest, and those who are the fittest propagate their genes, whereas those who are not fit don't get to propagate their genes. This is a scientifically actually not in reality a true notion. Okay, it's the survival of the fittest doesn't mean the most ruthless wins out in the end. This is where most people take this and then bring it into the human realm, and apply this notion to human beings and say, well, if he's in the position where he has all this money and influence and power, his genes somehow must have got him there. You can see how the elite really want to propagate this notion, the quote unquote elite. They want to propagate the notion that they're somehow genetically superior to everybody else. And moreover, they want to propagate the notion that society should somehow be structured in a way that is, quote, dog eat dog, and is about the propping up of the most ruthless, or the ones who are the most willing to basically step on everybody else to get to where they are in the social hierarchy and the social structure. This is called social Darwinism. And again, it stems out of this Darwinian macrobiological evolutionary theory, which really isn't how the species propagates itself through this notion of survival of the fittest. It's largely more about natural selection through the ones who understand and have more consciousness regarding their environment. And that's what humanity is lacking right now, is consciousness regarding what's really going on around us. Most importantly, what's going on within the human mind that's creating what's going on around us.
Right.
So social Darwinism is a very dangerous and slippery slope into the final tenet of Satanism, the final ideological component of this religion, which is eugenics. If the most ruthless people got to the top, then, and their genes got them there, well, the idea goes something like, shouldn't they be able to basically decide how the society is structured and moves forward? And what better way to do that than to decide who gets to propagate their genes and who does not get to propagate their genes? Or in other words, in simpler terms, who gets to live and survive and who must die? That's
Oop. Let me pull that one back out. So that's part one, Fitz. We've got quite a few parts, in fact, 3 parts of that to play. So we'll just move on into part 2, or do you want to explain something there?
Not so much. I mean, I think there's a few slides in between that and the next one.
Oh, I beg
so
your
that will
pardon.
probably have some relevance to what's to come next.
Let's get to
but
that.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. What I wanted to show here is I wanted to get into, because if you remember, I did say I wanted to show how the conditions are what's been manufactured for people to actually slip out of their true divine selves. And so he does a really good job of explaining that. And that's why I wanted to, have him in there, because he's going to do a better job than me fumbling over my words, because he's been doing this for years, right? So why not leave it to him as opposed to me trying to say it the way he would. But I did want to focus on, we did this last week, but I did just want to focus on confusion. That's why I put this slide up here. And you can see it's in opposition to sovereignty, right? So if you're sovereign, you're not living in a state of confusion because you know how to align all 3 aspects of your consciousness to work in the service of what you seek. Now, someone who's in confusion, they believe they're actually acting in the service of what they seek, but the 3 elements of their consciousness is always in opposition to one another. So they can never actually achieve it. And because they can't recognize that, right, they know something's out of whack, because you hear people complain about life all the time, right? But they always believe it's an external thing. They never see it as something that's happened from within, because to them, they're in charge of their own decisions. So it can't be them. It's got to be somebody else. And that's how you get people to work against each other, is that they get to believe the problem exists outside of them, that they're fine, they're autonomous. They start believing these things, but they don't even understand the meaning of the words that they're using. They sort of get the sentiment, but they really don't understand what that word means, what autonomy actually looks like in real time. How does an autonomous being behave? They don't have those examples because there's no one else around them who can give them that example. So then they're working off really poor models, and they take that as a truth.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And blindly accept it as the truth.
Yep, absolutely.
Without question.
That's kind of why I want to bring that up. I mean, there's going to be more explanation of confusion in a second.
Confusion is the negative internal expression for natural law, the emotional response stimulated through the lack of understanding that arises when one is in fear of taking in knowledge of natural law, aka refusal of truth, resulting in internal anarchy, absence of a ruler from within, the conditions for slavery.
So, yeah, that's pretty much what I said a moment ago. That's just a really clear way to define how confusion works. That there has to be a state of no ruler from within. So if you can't master yourself, then what's happened? There's a vacuum. That means the door is open for someone to master you. And that's the aggregate, right? That's we as a species on the aggregate. Now, that can't happen overnight. That's a very long, deliberate, meticulously planned out structure. And that structure is called structural violence. And most people are not aware that that's even in existence, because they think that people are just innately violent, right? Not that violence comes as a reaction to you being violated. That's what very few people understand.
Well, yeah, but it's not hard to understand, because when we have been violated for whatever reason, if we feel, all right, let's use mobile phone laws now while you're driving. In Queensland, I think the mobile phone fine is over $1,000, 4 months or 4 points, and 4 points off your license. Now okay, you shouldn't be on your mobile phone while you're driving, but is that fair? Is $1,000 and 4 points, which might take you off the road completely, fair? Is that a just response? And then you're going to feel violated because you got that fine, because you don't feel that it is fair. Multiply that out on a scale of the rates for your house, any other council fine or fee that you've been charged, tax you've been levelled against. All of that makes you feel like you're being attacked. That is a condition of control placed upon us, and we push back. That's what happens. People push back. There are small violent acts, sometimes against those that are making the demands. Sometimes they just break out. Violence can come in many ways, shapes and forms, and we all know that domestic violence particularly can be impacted by, financial stresses in the marriage from one point of view, from many different things. Some people are just out and out.
What you just described, Carl, is called structural violence, right? That's a structure that makes sure that you're going to be violated in every aspect of every part of your life. Like there's not a part you can get away from where you're not being violated. That's a deliberately implemented plan.
So you're saying the way to get away from that is to obviously think the way we're meant to be thinking, using our positive thoughts, if you like, to reinforce ourselves and our actions.
It's to understand your environment the way it is, not how you've been trained to see it. To really look deeper and truly understand how it's giving you every cue to work against your innate self. You need to be able to see it, right? And it needs to be glaringly obvious to you. So then you don't react to it. You actually go back into a place of consideration, and then you work your way through it slowly, right? Well, when are you going to get time to do that? If you have a job, right, you're constantly going to be under stress in a job situation. There's always demands made on you. You're going to be pretty exhausted. Most people take their job home with them because that doesn't finish, when they clock off. There's still things they need to resolve. So they've got that going through their minds. When are they really going to have the space to sit down and really take a proper look at how this is a deliberate structure so they are suffering? Very few people are going to have the capacity to do that because they're under permanent stress. And what happens when you're under permanent stress? You don't think from the frontal cortex, right? You're in that fight, flight, freeze mode. You're in a reactionary space. You're hyper vigilant because your nervous system is escalated. These ancient psychologists know this, right? That's why they create these conditions. It wasn't an accident, right? And then they get you to actually believe you want this. This is how life is meant to be, because we're naturally just competitive. We are naturally violent. We are naturally hostile. Do you know what I mean? That's that social Darwinism theory right there. They're just,
and not only that,
like crazy.
They've been able to teach this to every one of your ancestors who has taught it to you on their behalf for the last 2,000 years.
Yep, they end up being your parents and your friends and your family. They all end up being agents for the state without even knowing it, because they act it out. They act it out. They're not even aware that they're acting out what they're being coached into acting out. So then you just take this as what human behavior is.
Let's have a look at the corporation. It's made up of two words: corpse, meaning dead, and orate, to speak. Corporation, the speaking dead. It's an artificial entity, void of integrity. Corporations were created as a buffer to limit the liability of men who lack integrity due to their intention to deceive and plunder their fellow man in order to gain differential advantage over them and escape being made accountable by the very people they deceive in order to carry on plundering.
Yeah, so why I've put this here is because this is at the center of the entire structure, right? Anyone who this comes into their consciousness as something that they see that this is what's necessary, this is someone who has an ulterior motive, right? But they understand what the consequences are if they ever get found out for that ulterior motive. So what they need to do is they need to create a veil, right? Some kind of protective banner, And so what this is a soulless entity. And if it's a soulless entity and it's your shield, then that entity is what will do the violating. That's the fantasy they created. That's part of the superstition. And then you, the being that's actually actioning, you're doing the actual action, right? You can just say, no, it's not me. That's corporate policy. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm just doing my job, right? That's that perfect, like the Milgram experiment when they turned around and they said to the guy that was in charge, I don't want to keep doing this. And they said, no, you got to, and then they'd turn back around and say, well, if I do it, are you going to take full responsibility? Well, that's what this is, right? Who's going to take responsibility for the things we innately know are violating to another? As long as it doesn't fall on our shoulders, we'll go do it. That's what a corporation is. That's why it was created. It was to get people to overcome that innate barrier they have to violating one another. That's its entire intention. So that's why I wanted to put it there, is that this is part of that Satanistic construct, right? Because they understand karma, right? And so they need to get people to step over their conscience. And so one of the ways is to believe that karma is not coming to them for what they do. So this is what the corporation was truly designed for. It's to get people to act in ways they never would if they knew that if they really believed they were accountable for what they did. And that's what the police are, right then and there.
Moral relativism. Man-made laws that contradict and conflict with the laws of nature. The dialect where one action or behaviour is right in one place and wrong in another. And, policy, procedure, legal legislation, Roman canon law, admiralty law, bylaws, codes and ordinances.
So you can see that why I've got them all together is this is, what moral relativism looks like, in a legislative framework, so Mark's going to explain it soon when we get to the video. And then it gets hidden because these are made up things, right? But because they have this air of authority around them, that this illusionary thing, that there's something that you can't argue with, that just is.
It's the illusion of power. It's the illusion of control.
Then it doesn't get challenged. That's the whole
authority.
reason why they set up this. Yes, they set it up so it's not to be challenged. This needs to be out of your scrutiny, right? It needs to be cordoned off. This is not to be looked at. This is just how it is. This is permanent. This is just what's predetermined, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you make your peace with it. That's the whole way that this is put forward, and people swallow it up.
Yeah, well, because they don't see that they have an alternative, but we do. We do.
And if it's not brought to people's consciousness and their awareness, that's where things remain.
Absolutely. Confusion. What a state. The state of internal anarchy where the mind is ruled by fear and ignorance. A state of opposition within one's own consciousness by being torn apart from within in such a way that the three aspects of consciousness, thoughts, emotions, and actions, are in perennial contradiction to each other.
So you think about the times I've spoken to grandparents and they've said, how they missed out on 1.5 years of seeing their grandkids, and then they talk about the anguish they suffered, yet they don't talk about, well, why did we even agree to that, right? They never speak about that part. They just talk about what it was like to suffer that. And while we're all doing it, it wasn't just us. So that's what that is in real time, right? Your thoughts, actions, and emotions are in absolute contradiction to one another, right? They're suffering, but they're justifying their suffering. You know what I mean? They're not listening to, hang on, if I'm suffering, there's a message here about some form of violation that I need to address. And then as soon as I address it, that suffering will be alleviated. They don't do that bit. And when you don't listen to why you've got those emotions coming up into you, and that is actually spurring you on to actually do something about it, to get back into balance, well, then you are living that life of someone who's in perpetual confusion. And that's what they needed to create. They needed to create us not understanding how to stand in our divine power. And they've done a brilliant job at it.
And to understand, and this is a statement I'm aiming particularly at those people who've contacted me with a great desire to become an Australian version of a constitutional sheriff in this country, or indeed people who would like to be known or able to be called upon as jurors in a trial by jury. The three aspects of consciousness: thoughts, emotions, and actions. Those are the things we talk about when we say you must have in alignment. Your thoughts must be in alignment with your emotions, and both of those must be in tune with your actions for you to be working in harmony and to be able to attain the level of consciousness required to sit as a juror in a trial by jury. And I suggest to even begin to think about becoming a constitutional sheriff, you will have to be able to prove, no doubt, all three aspects of consciousness in you are aligned. I don't think I'm overstating that too strongly, am I?
No, absolutely not. Like, I couldn't agree more, because you need to be able to attain self-mastery if you're going to take on in that position, where that requires a lot of responsibility. The choices you make need to be clearly understood, and the actual consequences of those choices. They cannot be just light, it needs to be really felt deeply about the consequences of the choices you're about to make. Because if you're given that level of authority, it needs to come with serious responsibility. And the only way you can do that is to understand how thoughts even come into your being. Where do they come from? Are they coming from you? Are they old beliefs that you've, learned to attach to without ever really questioning? You need to go to that level of self-discovery, and this is not an easy road. That takes time. Yep. So if you're serious about this, there are people who know how to identify someone who has done the work. So you're going to need to be able to prove that.
Yeah. All right, let's set this video up again very quickly because we've sort of broken that down. So this is part 2 of the Satanism chat.
Yeah, so he's going to go in a little bit more depth, and he's going to start explaining things like natural and like that. So a lot of people that I've met, they think God's law and natural law, that God's law is above natural law. Well, he explains it in a way that you can see that they're one of the same thing. They're just labels, but they all mean the same thing. So it's a really important one, this one.
In other words, in simpler terms, who gets to live and survive and who must die. That's eugenics. And these 4 belief systems taken in tandem with each other are what I call the 4 main ideological tenets of the satanic belief system, the satanic ideology, the satanic religion. Self-preservation as the highest aspiration for the individual, moral relativism, social Darwinism, and eugenics. And if you look at our society, the vast majority of people, although they may not be able to quite articulate those things and explain what they are, if you ask them if they agree with certain of these tenets, more likely than not, they are more likely to say, yes, they do agree. I would say that society has been conditioned, has been manipulated, has been mind controlled into a satanic mindset without most people even realizing that they are espousing or that they are holding satanic beliefs.
Well, it's very simple. I mean, they've been conned by the term freedom. You see, I mean, the point being that, freedom is wonderful, but absolute freedom is also is actually Satanism, right? The idea that there are no limits, that there are no boundaries, that we can do whatever we choose to do, whatever pleases us, right? This sort of Benthamite philosophy, like whatever makes me feel good is good, right? Exactly. What makes me feel bad is bad. And what you said in terms of your tenets of of the satanic philosophy all reinforces the fact that there is no God in that worldview. Right. There is no God. Right. There is no higher good in that worldview.
That's right. And man is the highest power in nature, and therefore, since there is no force that's going to make us basically come to terms with the consequences of our behavior or deliver to us consequences for our behaviors, right, then we could just get to do whatever we want. We could say this is right.
Yeah, we become gods ourselves, especially those who believe in the eugenics philosophy as well. That's right. I can now become the god.
The Nazi society, they were basically saying we are on our way to becoming gods because we have all the powers of a god, total information, omniscience, all powerful, omnipotence, and we get to decide who lives and who dies, and those are godlike powers, and basically, that's what the ideology of eugenics does, and this is a satanic belief system. Nazism was a form of dark occultism. It was a satanic, political ideology and religion. And, this is propagated throughout our society relentlessly. People are in this total me mindset, not caring about what's going on in the wider world. And that's how this propagates this idea of, total enslavement. That's how it propagates the agenda of total enslavement. You have to get people to subscribe to your ideology if you're going to be masters over them at a lower level, and think that there is legitimacy to it and take it on as part of their own belief system. And that's part of the reason that we're in the situation that we're in. People have come to believe that life is all about just selfish pursuit of pleasure. They've come to believe that freedom is about just doing whatever you want without the restriction of morality, of understanding the difference between right and wrong behavior, and without any responsibility. They don't want any responsibilities in life to understand what's going on and to choose the difference between right and wrong behaviors for themselves once they clearly know what that difference is. If people don't know what rights are, that's what they want to wipe out in a satanic culture. They don't want anybody to really understand what a right is. Right is an action that does not cause harm to another being, and hence a wrong doing is something that does cause harm to another being. It's really actually quite that simple, and people really can't even define that. They can't tell you what a right is, and when you don't know what a right is, you're invariably going to lose them. And that's why our culture is well along the road to tyranny and enslavement. And that, I feel, is about to go hot. We've been involved in this kind of cold form of tyranny for a long time, but they're building up to try to take more and more rights at a more and more rapid pace. and they want to come in and bring hot tyranny, hot enslavement to the people of the world because they want it all, and they're not going to stop until they essentially have crushed the human soul. That's the ultimate goal in all of this. And, I mean, you look at the archetypal image of the devil or Satan, and the goal is basically the same. I mean, it's actually named very appropriately. They use the iconographic imagery of, the Christian devil. But if you really look at the ideas, even in ancient Hebrew, Satan, the word Satan, shaitan, meant adversary, or the one who opposes. And what they're opposing is the real order in the universe, which is what I call natural law. People have called it spiritual law, moral law, God's laws. It doesn't really make a difference what label you slap on it. It's basically the same thing. They want to turn natural law on its head, and they want to rule instead of that higher force, that higher power, that higher creative intelligence, which is the moral laws of the universe that are not put into place by man, but are put into place by the creator of the universe.
Well, it's interesting because what you're talking about with this feeding upon the soul, a lot of it seems to be contractual. The fact that we are basically surrendering our sovereignty. We are allowing ourselves to go into contract with all these different forms of power over us that are in violation of natural law. As we say, the natural law being, look, my right is, to basically do as I will, as I please, to the point that I'm not harming someone else. So if I'm parking my car in a space that's 1 foot over a red line, I'm not blocking a fire hydrant, and yet the city has the right to charge me $100 for that. That's corrupt, and it's a violation. I'm not harming anyone. I'm not obstructing anything in this process, and yet you're fining me. For your own advantage, right? And that's how most of the corruption happens in our country, at least. In other countries, it may be different. But the point being, in our country, we're willing to pay. So as long as we're paying, we don't really mind if we're paying, thousands of dollars in insurance for potential, things that may never occur to us, or if we're paying, thousands of dollars in tickets for violations that don't harm anyone, right? So we're basically constantly paying, but ultimately, it boils down to this obstruction of our natural rights because we don't know what they are, and yet we allow our society to be regulated down to every degree of existence, such that every day we are violating the laws in so many numbers of ways that if at any moment the officer decides to arrest us or to charge us, we are in violation because of this sort of matrix of law that's been established.
And it just goes to show you how morally relativistic our society is, how morally relativistic all of the laws of man are. Why can you perform a behavior in one state, okay, and you do that behavior in another state or another country, and it's considered a wrongdoing there? You think about it. You could do the same behavior in a different place on the earth. In one place, it's looked at as a right, and no one will come to take your freedom. And in another place, it's looked at as a wrong, where the quote authorities, the state, will come and take your freedom as a result of performing the very same behavior. Well,
jaywalking in New York as opposed to Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills, try it and you'll see what you get a ticket for, right?
Is it moral in one place and immoral in another? Does man get to decide on his whim or preference what actions or behaviors are right in one place and wrong in another place? I mean, this is the total contradiction and absurdity of the laws of man, and most people can't see the contradiction because they're so brainwashed by the illusion or belief in authority. It's a religion, and that's why most people stick staunchly, steadfastly to it, because you ask them to question their religion and they just can't do it. They can only think with a one-track mind. That's their religious dogmatic belief, and they're sticking to it. This is what moral relativism is about. How could alcohol production, ownership, and consumption have gone from being legal and then in the 1920s, it became illegal in the United States. Then later, it went back to becoming legal. Now, did it go from being moral at that one period in time to then in the 20s becoming an immoral behavior, and then go back to becoming a moral behavior after they repealed that amendment? I mean, absolutely not. Right and wrong behaviors don't change over time. If it's a behavior that harms someone, it's a wrongdoing. If it doesn't harm someone, it's a right, period. For all places, all times, eternally. Right. And This is what I try to explain when I go into what I call natural law. I prefer the term natural law. Some people hate the term and would rather it be called all the time spiritual law, because it's the same thing, or moral law, or even God's law. Okay, so again, it's just a label, it's just a term. I like the word natural because it emphasizes that it is inherent to creation, which is what the word natural means.
Wow, he knows his stuff, doesn't he? There's no messing about.
Yeah, so he's got this capacity to articulate understanding, of words and what they truly mean and how they're manipulated and how others come to accept them as truths when they're not really truths. And, he can really break that down for you. So, for me, it's about really exposing that, because if people don't actually have that in their awareness, they've got nothing else to work from other than what they've been taught up until that point.
Yeah.
So it's about how do you expose people to, there is more there that's just been hidden from you. That's what's on offer here. It's about exposing yourself, and then are you in a place where you're willing to consider it, right? And then what will land for you after it mixes around inside you for a while. Let it be tested with your conscience, see what comes out because of it. So it's just about offering that opportunity for your conscience to be the guide here.
Yes, sorry, I was just reading a couple of the comments. All right, let's get back into the slides. Natural, something that is inherent in creation and having a basis in reality and objective truth, not made or caused by mankind or any other 3D being.
So I really like that. That's a really simplistic way to understand what's natural, right? So then you don't have to get into an argument that this is something satanic or something not, It's like, it's right there. It's really straightforward. And it's easy, for me, it's easy to understand. I don't know how other people are experiencing it, but for me, that's
okay,
really
so it's easy to understand from a animal perspective, something that is naturally, let's think of a koala. It's inherent in creation, has its basis in reality, and it has an objective truth, and that it is real. It hangs in a gum tree stoned all day, and if you're not careful, will drop out of the tree and onto your head, particularly if you're a tourist in Australia. They call them drop bears. But explain that to me in a different sense, in our natural law sense. So this comes down to what feels right, being in alignment, having all three aspects of our conscious in alignment again, doesn't it?
Yes. So if you think about it, it says something that is inherent in creation. Well, we are also inherent in creation, right? No different to what you said about the koala. The difference between us and a koala, aside from the obvious physical, attributes, is that we actually have access to a higher order of thinking, like to be able to use logic, like that way to really discern differences, like we can do that. And we also have access to the spiritual realm. That's why we're affected by a whole other level of the laws of nature, and that is the governing dynamics of the spiritual world, right? What that means is that we understand the difference between behaviors that are harmful and behaviors that are helpful. And we understand that there's consequences for that, right? So that's why we're governed by a whole new set of rules that is inherent in the construct by which we live, that other 3D beings don't have. But what it's saying is here is we still didn't have a say in any of those things. Those laws that exist, we don't have a say in it. We're not capable of doing anything to change it. That's what it's saying. So we're no different to the animal kingdom in that regard. We're just held to a higher level or a higher standard because we have access to a conscience.
Do you think part of the dumbing down that we've endured, that we've been discussing tonight, has led to us not to analyze our decisions with enough, if you like, examination of the consequences of those decisions before we make them? This gets back to what we were talking about earlier about I want it and I want it now. It's got to be the big house, not the little house. I want, 4 bedrooms, not 2. Has our consciousness been changed so that we don't consider consequences now as deeply as we should when decisions have to be made?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that's why this whole thing's why I'm going through this tonight is exactly what you said. That's the only way it can happen is if to contract our consciousness, and that has to be manufactured. And that the way you do that is you get people to attach to beliefs as opposed and get them to believe that those beliefs are knowledge. And that's very carefully constructed and manufactured. And it requires a very massive network to make that, a reality. And you need to do it in a way where the majority of people, which just won't even be aware that they're under that level of control. They'll know something's not right, but that's not enough for them to actually really get what it is that's not right. And as long as they don't get it, that's what matters. Because the difference between those who call themselves elites and the rest of us is the knowledge of how we work, our intimate understanding of our true nature. And if we can obscure that knowledge, then we've got good slaves. They knew that from a very, very long time ago. And they've set a plan in action. And that's why they keep it in their bloodlines, right? Because it has to be propagated. If they don't keep it in their bloodlines, it won't be propagated.
Exactly.
And this is the essential component of why everything's in a tight-knit society that has to prove itself worthy of getting this access to that knowledge.
All right.
And that's why there's that ritualistic component to it, because that's a really good way to make sure people adhere to that structure.
Absolutely. Law, an existing condition that is both binding and immutable. It exists both in the present and in perpetuity or permanent across all realms. We've discussed this many times.
Yeah, like that's all now is I'm just tying the two together so you can see how the word natural and law has its meaning based on the two separate meanings of it. And then when you tie it together, that hopefully makes sense for people. When they hear the word natural law, they understand its true meaning, which hopefully is in the next slide.
This bit, a universal force that exists within creation that brings to beings with the capacity... Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'll start again. Natural law, a universal force that exists within creation that brings to beings with the capacity to understand the difference between life-serving and life-alienating behavior, the consequences of behavior chosen through free will.
So what that means, another way to put that is beings who understand the difference between what Mark was saying earlier about right action and wrong action. Well, that's life-serving is what we call right action. Life alienating is what we call wrong action. So if you have that capacity to understand that difference and discern the consequences for that, that, well, then what's going to come to you is the consequences for that, because that is what you're born with that responsibility. It's not asking whether you like it or not. It's just there. That's the determined part of our existence. That's been predetermined for us. So then if that's in existence, we get to make the choice whether we accept it or we refuse it. That's the part where we have a choice. But then we need to be ready for the responsibility for what that choice will deliver. And it's always those who refuse truth that are oblivious to it. That's the dichotomy, right?
Yeah. All right, now we're getting back to another video. So
I reckon after this one, we might need to pull a pin on it because we'll be going for like 3 hours if we don't. So we might just leave it after this one, Carl.
Yeah, you've really got to learn how to not talk so much, Fitz, really. Or I've got to stop asking stupid questions. One of the two. All right, let's get into this.
The thing about questions, Carl, is that knowledge welcomes questions because knowledge expands from them. So I would never be the one. I'd never be the one to tell you to stop asking questions. It won't come from me.
No, and I'll point out to you folks that I'm learning at the same rate you are now. We've well past what I've learnt, previously to bringing all this to you. So I'm learning as we go, and I'm not the world's smartest person. I'm always trying to draw, the way that Fitz writes these cards. Sometimes I find very difficult to interpret in a layman's sense. So I always try to ask a question in that regard, just for my own clarification. I'm sorry if it makes me sound like a goose, but I want to understand this, and we can only go as fast as our slowest learner. And if you ever saw my school reports, you'd know that Carl probably is the slowest learner. So we're just going to stumble along at my pace. I'm sorry, that's how it is.
Well, I reckon you take a few people. I reckon you take a few people with you as well. So that's probably a welcome thing.
Oh, good. All right. Well, let's get into the third one.
I like the word natural because it emphasizes that it is inherent to creation. which is what the word natural means. We have this natural that it somehow relates to this thing called the natural order in people's minds. Now, what I see as the natural order is completely different than when you say that term to people, what they conjure in their mind about, a lion taking down an animal in some field somewhere.
Well, the animalistic natural order as opposed to the human natural order, which ultimately boils down to a responsibility. This responsibility to ourselves, a responsibility to our communities, to others. Now, obviously, we're not talking about becoming authoritarian about what that, where the responsibility begins and ends, but more in an awareness and awakening of learning. I think that's really what it boils down to, is the carrot versus the stick. I mean, are we trying to educate people and help them understand their own sense of morality, responsibility, that they are part of a much greater cosmos of being, right? That ultimately their actions matter and have consequence. And you can teach them that, or you can beat it into their heads and say, if you don't do it, you're going to go to hell. And that obviously is what leads people, I think, like yourself, to want, to explore Satanism or other forms of rebellion, which is the natural, I think, the natural consequence of trying to beat it into people's heads as opposed to teaching them and saying, look, everything has consequence. Let's understand the science of it. Let's understand, the implication, the cause and effect.
That's it. It's all about cause and effect. It's all about causality and what effects manifest in the world as a result of the causal factors of us putting certain behaviors out into creation. We are invariably, inescapably going to reap the effects of those causes that are put out there by our behaviors. This is what I term natural law. And it's funny how the word natural has been hijacked to think of, as you said, that animalistic, quote, natural order, which isn't order, okay? The word natural simply means inherent to creation and having a basis in reality and truth. And that's all it ever has meant, really. That's the definition of the word. It really simply means not made or caused by humankind, not made or caused by anything that a 3D being can do, okay? It is pre-existing. It is inherent to nature, to reality itself. And that's what this kind of law is. It's like you think of a physical law like gravity or electromagnetism, okay? Man didn't make that. That's going to be in effect whether any humans are here or not. So it's something that exists in nature, in reality, and it's not made or caused by humankind. That's what the word natural means. And a law is an existing condition that is both binding, meaning it has an effect whether you understand it or like it or not, and it's immutable, meaning it cannot be changed by anything that we are capable of doing. So when we put these two things together, okay, natural and law, my definition for this universal force that exists within creation that brings to us the consequences of the behaviors that we choose through our free will, that's what I call natural law. My working definition is universal, non-man-made, binding and immutable or unchangeable conditions that govern the consequences of the behaviors of beings with the capacity to understand the difference between right and wrong behaviors. So that's a mouthful, but if you just break it down and take it a little bit at a time, you'll understand what I mean by natural law, or cosmic, universal, spiritual, moral law, God's law, if you will. Yeah. They're universal, meaning they exist everywhere. Doesn't matter where you go, they're in effect. Non-man-made, no 3D being, for that matter, not even just mankind, made them. Okay, the universe made them. The creative underlying intelligence in nature made them. They're binding, meaning they have an effect whether you understand them or not, whether you like that they exist or not. You are affected by them. They are immutable. They are unchangeable by anything we are capable or anyone else is capable of doing. Conditions that govern the consequences. They govern consequences of the behavior of beings that have the capacity to understand the difference between right and wrong behavior. So they govern our behavior. They govern human behavior. Yeah. So natural law is this body of universal spiritual laws that act as the governing dynamics of human consciousness and free will choice. That's what natural law is. And it's the ultimate solution to understanding what's going on in the world. It's the answer to that question, why? Why are we experiencing the loss of freedom that we are? Why is satanic culture basically so prevalent? Why are we descending into tyranny and enslavement as an entire society? The understanding that we do not respect natural law or live within its parameters, within its boundaries, that we do not accept that there is objective morality, that we are always thinking and focused on the self, service to self only. This mentality is creating the reality that we experience, and we are reaping the consequences. This force has been called consequentialism. This whole idea of natural law has in the past been referred to some philosophers as consequentialism, meaning that it is about how we receive the consequences for what we ourselves enact in the world, in the aggregate sense. I mean, this doesn't just work on the individual level. It works in an aggregate sense upon entire societies. So it would behoove us to understand how natural law actually operates to bring us the experiences that we must live and undergo, because we set those effects into motion through the causal factor of choosing through our free will certain behaviors. And when we choose rightly, which means we choose right behavior that is moral, that is in harmony with natural law, we receive one set of consequences. And those consequences are the entire culture becomes more free. So this is intimately and inextricably interwoven and connected with human freedom. When we choose the other behavior, when we choose wrong behavior in the aggregate sense, humanity then receives the consequences of a different result, and we become more enslaved. I call this the law of freedom. You know, as morality in the aggregate sense increases in society, that society of beings becomes more free. As morality wanes or declines and immorality increases in a society, meaning more harm, more wrongdoings, more theft, more behavior that doesn't respect people's life, rights, and property, then that culture becomes more and more enslaved. As morality increases, freedom increases. As morality declines, freedom declines.
Yeah. That's a good place to leave it. So people can follow up more with you on whatonearthishappening.com.
Absolutely. That's my main website. I always recommend to people who are checking it out for the first time to go to the podcast section where all the audio files are at.
I got to say, very impressed. We've got to try and find him, Fitz. I'd love to have him on the show.
Yeah. Now, there was a question in the chat that I said, is there, someone asked, is there links to this, what I've grabbed? Yes, there is. I've sent them to Carl. I'm not sure if you've got I did give you the names of the videos and the links.
Should find them in the description there, folks. If you just keep scrolling down, it should all
sent
be in
links
there.
through so you can actually find where this is. It's on YouTube. Most of Mark's stuff you can find on YouTube, so it's very surprising, yes, that it hasn't been taken down or suppressed. That one I can't explain. I don't know why, because he's just telling it how it is. He's exposing it, and maybe there's something about that they require someone to expose it. You know, that they can't go against that because that'll actually expose them to karma. I don't know. I don't really understand why they've left it. It doesn't make sense to me either. But that's the only guess I've got. Is there's got to be some relationship with karma that the Dark Cabal understands that they can't mess with this.
All right, mate, let's leave it.
Say, if I can, Carl.
Yeah.
He was talking about the causal factors, and that's where we started this, right? So that's why this is there. This is about really looking at the causal factors, and it's our lack of understanding of natural law. And if we really want to move forward and create a new world, that's where we need to start. We need to start catching up on the knowledge that's been hidden from us, right? Not our opinions, right? Because when I look at this chat, all I'm seeing is people's opinions, right? There's only controversy in opinions, right? This is where we can all unite because we can all verify it. And if we don't understand that which unites us, right, what have we got? We've got division. So we go to the place where we're all united, where there is no division. And that's in natural law because we are bound to those laws. Whether we like it or not, we disagree with it, we're still bound to them. The same outcomes happen whether you agree or disagree, right? And the other thing I wanted to say is that he speaks about hot tyranny, right, and it's coming hot. Well, this was done 7 years ago, right? So he even knew what was coming just by being able to see the patterns. So that's how you can really get ahead of the game, if you understand the patterns. And you can only understand the patterns if you understand natural law. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I've made sure that this information gets out, because we need to raise our consciousness in a way that we can all attach to, in a way there's no disagreement. And if we find that space, then we will create the new world we all say we want.
I've seen a few things that I've just kept track of in the chat tonight. Mike has put this up. They're trying to destroy all the bees and insects that may play a part in natural production. It's to make honey scarce and only in the hands of the corporation. Of course, if we lose bees, we actually lose food production. We lose pollination completely. It becomes a real disaster if we lose bees. It's interesting to note that deer that are quite plentiful in the hills out the back of Wollongong and have been protected, or at least not allowed to be shot by anybody on a regular basis. Only the elites, if you like, have been able to get access at limited times to go in and shoot deer. Well, apparently New South Wales government has thrown that wide open now, so anybody with a gun license and a desire to go out and shoot a deer can do so. Now, you might all say, if you're a shooter, woohoo, great. I don't subscribe to a hunting theory. I've never I'm into shooting. I like shooting, but I'm not into hunting. I'm particularly into target shooting and accuracy and that sort of thing, but I'm not interested in going out and shooting another animal. But I understand that there are some people who do enjoy that sort of thing. But analyse what they're doing, folks, in New South Wales. They're throwing open the deer so that you can all go out and hunt them to near extinction. And when there is a food shortage, you won't be able to go out into the bush and hunt deer and have venison for dinner. They're thinning out the herd. They're making them more scarce. The bees, something very similar. So keep an eye on all of that. Now, Rip Me has thrown up a few interesting things in the chat tonight. The first one that caught my eye was this one, Fitz, the free man. You won't hear us use the free man argument here, will you, Fitz? We don't subscribe to the free man theory. So if you are a free man believer, you're in the wrong place, unless you want to learn to be different. We'll leave that one there. Address the ridicule of 1215. I was a little bit confused until I followed on and read this, namely the rich barons signed under duress. I don't know how many times we've explained this, Fitz, so I'm starting to get a bit shaky on it.
Yeah, I know. I'm guessing he's new to the whole thing. And hasn't listened
lesson
to
number one, and people are saying lesson number one doesn't exist on Magna Carta. Lesson number one doesn't exist on None 2K. I can assure you, folks, that there are every lesson is on None 2K if you search it correctly. I have mistitled 4 and 5. So I've mistitled them in the way that part 4 says lesson 4 part 1, and then part 5 says part 5 or lesson 5 part 2. They are in fact back-to-back lessons 4 and 5, or so I just put a part number in there. I shouldn't. That's why it gets confusing. There is only one, I think you told me, Fitz, that isn't up there. That's lesson number 7, which is available on it is available on Project Matilda, but I will upload it not just to YouTube, to None 2K, but it is available on Carl Liebold, Voice of Freedom, and just Voice of Freedom. The YouTube channels there, you'll find it there, but not on None 2K. I'll fix that to make it easier for people. But eventually, and hopefully shortly, I will have all of these lessons located with links on a web page at vofhq.com under our Magna Carta 1215 heading, where you will be able to just click on them and it'll take you straight to the show. So you can start at number 1 and work your way through, because we've just completed 15 and we're not really into answering questions from lesson number 1, 2, or 3. So the rich barons signed under duress. I'll just make it short. You can go and watch up the video, but the short answer to that, Rip Me, is bullshit. Blue Eyes. Okay, Blue Eyes put this one up. The pentagram, the all-seeing eye, a Catholic religious art stolen by the Satanists. Well, that would depend on how you view Catholic religious art, because those two particular things that you mentioned, the pentagram and the all-seeing eye, The pentagram itself was stolen by the Catholics or by the Vatican as they moved through pagan religions, and the pentagram actually came out of Egypt, if memory serves, and was a fertility symbol, or it meant good things initially. And of course, in the way that these bastards do things, they invert the meaning. So the pentagram came from a much older religion, if you like, and was adopted by the Vatican as Catholicism rolled through places like that. Because the easiest way to get the locals to adopt the new religion was to take their pagan symbols, or some of them, and adjust them into the Catholic religion. And the greatest example of that is the way that you end your prayer. Amen. Amen is directly taken from Amen Ra. Make from that what you will. So that comes directly from Egyptian times. So there are a lot of things that the Catholic Church stole, and they started it right from the beginning. I wouldn't put anything in the faith of the Catholic bloody Church. 7 natural laws: mentalism, vibration, correspondence, as above is below, rhythm, cause and effect, that's karma coming back at you, gender and polarity. I think David Leon has put up those 7 natural laws pretty well, Fitz. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, they're the 7 principles of natural law. So yes, they're correct.
Okay.
Mark does explain them really well. There are videos where he does explain them to a real degree where you understand what that all means. We don't have the time to go over that now, I'm afraid.
No.
Yes, I agree.
Now, Christoph, I'm struggling to understand where you sit in all this, and so I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt at the moment. So if you drink a beer and you don't, as a result, bring harm against another, then it's right to have a beer. I'm just trying to think about what part of the conversation we were having when you put that up, and I probably can't link to it. The fact of the matter is, I very rarely drink beer. I very rarely drink anything alcoholic, and I would have thought you can have a beer and it doesn't mean anything at all. If you have a beer and you punch someone in the mouth, it doesn't necessarily mean the beer caused that. You could just be an asshole. If you get very drunk very often, and every time you get drunk you start a fight, then you are an asshole, but you have a problem with beer. And that's probably why I don't drink much anymore, because I was that asshole. And I don't want to be that asshole ever again. Thankfully now it's 20 years and I haven't been that asshole. Scared shitless of a hangover, me, so that's how that works. But I don't understand, Christoph, where you're going with that. It seems like a very childish comment in what we think is a fairly serious room. So if it's all too much for you, mate, go back to lesson 1 and start there. Now, Auslander has put up, the only network that's succeeded in convincing people to believe in theories are sciences. Okay, we've done the science. We've done science, haven't we? The etymology of the word science?
Yeah, that's from conscience, has 2 aspects to it, and one of the aspects is the word science, which means to know, means to know intimately. So yes, in agreement. In agreement?
All right, we don't like raising things where you aren't. I'm just having a bit of a glance to see what else there is. There's a lot of talk about Bibles. What do we feel about the King James Bible, Fitz?
What I've come to understand, that's actually a dark occult, construct, and they use it in the fake courts, the corporate courts. So that's got to tell you something why they use it in there, right? Because that's their banking trust laws that they've hidden into there.
And they do it all under the King Edward crown.
And it was commissioned by, I think it was King James II, to memory. Don't get me. And he was the one that was the traitor.
Final one. The Talmud has popped up tonight in conversation a bit. I just put this comment up to remind me to ask about the Talmud. We haven't really delved into that side of the world, have we? At this juncture.
I mean, it's kind of, does it really matter if it's a Talmud or any other, thing that's been invented? It's all come from the same place. The same people wrote it. So it doesn't really matter. They're all versions of the same thing, because the idea is to capture your conscience. That's all it is. So whether it's a Talmud or whether it's some other version of it, it all has one function.
I do like Aaron's point here. The Bible, basic instructions before leaving Earth.
I guess that's one way to look at it. It depends which one you're talking about, and also what your interpretation is, because they're designed to have you,
Confused.
interpret what you want to put into it. So everyone, you will never get agreement on the Bible, right? So what's its true purpose?
Indeed. Good point. Very good point. All right, Fitz, there's an hour and 40, so I suppose we might not.
Yeah, I know, we've gone a lot longer.
Thank you to everybody for putting up with us tonight. So just to let people know, once again, we are, and when I say we, I mean me, Fitz isn't going to actually be in Singleton, but I will be. He will be there in the same way he is always with us, just a sort of an ethereal voice. But you will be able to ask him direct questions, and particularly if you're coming to the sessions happening Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 6th to the 8th of September, 1:30 till 3, and then the same session again, 7:30 till 9:30 that night. You'll be able to have a bit of a chat. There'll be a two-way microphone set up, so you'll be able to have a chat with Fitz afterwards, and he'll be able to answer a few of your questions. I have also been approached by some folks in Newcastle who've asked me while I'm down there if I would pop in and do a show with them. So we're just looking into that at the moment, and I would suspect that that will happen on my way back after I've been down in Sydney. So somewhere about the 14th or 15th, I suspect we might be doing a show in Newcastle somewhere. No details are in place yet. We've really only just started. I only read the email today, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if we can't work something out. There is likely to be a Sydney show after Singleton, where we will go live from somewhere in Sydney. I don't really know where yet. That could be anywhere from the front deck of Guru's boat to a 1,000-seat room at the Penrith Club. It kind of depends on a few things coming together, and with a little bit of luck, they will. And I'm sure folks in Sydney will look forward to coming along to the live show if the guests that we're hoping to have lined up will agree to come. So I won't say much more than that, but there will be one fella turning up. I think if he agrees, you would be very happy to have a chat with. So keep that in mind. That'll be coming up after the event you see on your screen right now, where Voice of Freedom goes to the Cali Hotel, 5th to the 9th of September. Really looking forward to coming into Singleton and finding out what amazing work the people have done there. I'm going to find out all about that showground story. That's awesome. But there is also some other weird stuff going on there, and we're going to try and help the people with that too, Fitz.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer one question that's in here that was asked to me from Vesna. Says, which Bible would you recommend to use? I actually don't recommend using any Bible, because all the knowledge you require to live in peace and harmony exists inside you. You don't need someone to tell you how to do it. It's already there. It's imprinted. You just need to listen to it.
That's exactly the way it should be. All right, folks, we'll leave it there. Fitz, thank you again for tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Once again, I have learned measurable amounts. It's always interesting coming on for a show with you.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. There's a lot more slides that I didn't get through tonight, so obviously that's going to have to be in the next week's show. So hopefully, if you guys want to go over this, it's going to help to understand what we do next week. So if you can find the time, guys, go back and listen to this, because it's going to set up next week perfectly.
Beautiful. All right, mate, you be safe, and we'll talk to you same time, same place next week, although it will be from Singleton.
Yep, and just want to say good night, everyone, and thank you for tuning in and making your contribution. I look forward to having you back next week.
Oh, look, we didn't talk about the stickers.
Oh, yes. How could we forget that?
I haven't got a picture of one here. Let me
Okay.
see. Hang on, let me just see if I've still got it. No, I don't. So, folks, we've got some new stickers. Fitz, you tell them what it is. Oh, no, I can't even do that. I'll race out and grab one, but I can't even show it at the moment. So,
was it the last one you showed me? Is that the one we're talking about?
Yes.
All right. So we've got some travel stickers, Article 61 travel stickers that you can put on your car or whatever else you want to. I can only think of the car because it's a travel sticker, unless you've got a motorbike.
Oh, yeah, car, motorbike, slap one on the back of your motorbike helmet.
Yeah, your truck, like whatever's you drive, van. Yep. That just itemizes, your actual standing under law. So, Carl's gone to the trouble of getting those made, guys. So Obviously, you can't show you to because he doesn't have them, but they're actually in production and they're there for anyone who would like them.
I picked them up. I just haven't taken a photo of them to show you yet. I only picked them up late this afternoon.
Yeah, and
so
so
they're very
basically
good.
really, really good to have, being visual. Now, the people in Singleton, if they all actually get together and rally behind this, and there's a whole flock of people with that on their cars, that's going to get a ton of attention because it's not the first time you see it. It's usually the 10th, 20th, whatever, that people start paying attention. So if they actually start, uniting, they're going to have so much influence in that town. Like they can actually be a model for all other places. So this is going to be massive if we can actually get this organized. So I'm really super excited.
And then, of course, we've got that sticker as well.
Yes, that's come up a real peach. So guys, when you see this sticker, you're going to be pretty excited if you want to really, get people's attention because it's been made for a vehicle or your laptop, something else that but I would use it on a vehicle. That would be my first recommendation because that's your, biggest billboard that you've got.
And you stick the A61 beside it. Nobody will be in any doubt where you stand.
Yep. It's making it clear intentions of that you are standing as a knight under law.
And we have had a lot of inquiry about turning this into a tattoo, Fitz.
Yes, I'm hearing a few people here and there mention that they're really going to get this done. So when we set off trying to pick something, we never knew what it was going to turn into. So this has been bigger than you or I could have imagined. So really, really pleased with the.
It turns out I have a friend who is a very, very good tattooist in her own right, but this is not her style. I asked her about being able to build us a template. So if people want a tattoo of this, we can just supply that and you walk that into the tattooist and say, put that on my arm. And it's that simple. Now, she was going off to speak with one of her colleagues who is much better at this style of work. And we are looking at making one or two changes to it, not huge, but one or two, mainly artistic because while the knight looks spectacular there, in print on T-shirts of breast size, he comes up as a big black spot. So I'm trying to get a little bit more definition into him somehow. So that may necessitate a few changes.
I just want to address one question if I can, Carl. It says here, so you don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God? If not, that totally changes my interest in your movement. I'm not sure who's that directed to, but are you saying that truth is not something you're interested in? Is that what you're saying, Danny? I'm confused. So if you want to give us some more clarity on that, because regardless of your beliefs, truth is consistent. And that's what this movement is about. It's just that simple. All the other things, that's your personal, preference. That's fine. You can have that. But this is about truth discovery and how to act in the service of truth, right? That which is universal to all of us. Is that problem? If that's going to be problematic for you, then yeah, maybe this isn't for you. Anyway, sorry, carry on. That was just took my attention.
All good. What about the T-shirts and hoodies someone has put up here? Yes. So hoodies, bloody expensive. You Melbourne people must be really cold because they're bloody expensive things to buy. However, I do have a bunch of orders. Now, the website, we do have a Shopify site that we're trying to incorporate into the website, and I haven't put photos up yet, but I will have photos to put up. You will be able to order hoodies, T-shirts, stickers, a few other bits and pieces, nothing huge. And look, to be honest, the hoodie would be the most expensive thing at the moment, and we haven't actually got a price on it at the moment. I know to buy the hoodie that I would like to be able to do all this on is about $39. And then we've got to print front and back on it. So I don't know, you're going to be looking at probably $65 or $70 for the hoodie by the time it's done. So if you're happy to pay that, I'm happy to go and get it. You can send an order. Hey, send an order to the new email address. Now, what was that? Sales, I think it's called. sales@vofhq.com. What we need is your size. I can make the orders. If you're prepared to buy the shirts, I'm prepared to, the hoodies, I'm prepared to make the orders. And I've got a bloke in Melbourne creating them for us right now. It'll probably be 2 weeks before I get any of those my way. And our Magna Carta T-shirts are in the same batch. I hope to have those Magna Carta T-shirts with me, or at least some of them, next week in Singleton, maybe by the end of the week. If not, certainly, hopefully, by the time we get to Sydney. It's just, taking a little bit longer than one would have hoped, but I'm not the one doing all the printing. Unfortunately, we've done all the groundwork. We can only go as fast as the queue progresses. So that's pretty much how it's working at the moment. Would love to be able to bring it to you faster. I am actually looking at other ways to get some sort of stuff printed up, but I can't get any numbers printed because I simply don't have the money to pay for it up front. So I'm pretty much reliant on taking the orders and getting the hoodies in particular. The T-shirts are slightly different. They're a little bit cheaper. We might be able to arrange something. But that's the story with all of that. Over the next few days, you will see pictures of the shirts going up. I have Voice of Freedom shirts available now, polo shirts, really, really nice polo shirts, which I think are about $65. That's $55 for the shirt and postage and handling on top for $10. I think it's the bag. We'll send all that to you. I've got those available now in different colors and different sizes. Don't have a huge amount of them, but more in the works. So yeah, it's all about being able to fund as many as we can print at a time, folks. So bear with us, and we will get it done. If you'd like to help us make it happen quicker, you can always donate. There is a donate button on vofhq.com website. Any donations that you give are used for this kind of stuff, to give us either equipment or something we can use to brand us so that we can see each other walking down the street. We know when we see somebody driving down the car with that sticker on the window, we know they're one of us. They're someone that you don't abuse because they mightn't have put their blinker on when they're turning left. Because at the end of the day, where their heart lies. Their heart's with us. So this is a way that we can see each other on the streets without knowing each other, but we can nod at each other and say, yeah, I know what you're about, brother or sister. That's what it's about. We're building a community, folks, and we want you to be part of it. And the only way I can see for you to be part of it is to wear the VOF logo and to let people know that that's what you're about. And you see somebody else walking down the street with the same shirt on, or a different color maybe, you'll know straight away. You'll be able to stop in the street and have a conversation like you used to have with people without having to, figure out whether or not they'd been assaulted by the juicy dart or not. So this is a way of bringing us all together. That's what this is all about. So T-shirts, stickers, enough profit in those T-shirts and stickers to put a litre of fuel in the car to get us closer to your place so we can bring a show to you. That's all this is about. We want to build the community. We need you either to accept us or not. I guess if you don't accept us, we're not building anything, and this will die a death. But at the moment, people seem to be enjoying what we're doing. So we want you to enjoy. We want you to learn. We don't want to make this a task. It has to be enjoyable. You'll take it in a lot easier, and it'll fall naturally to you. And next thing you know, we're going to have an army behind us, a peaceful army, but an empowered, educated army that can stand up and fight for all of us. A unified solution. That's what I'm hoping for, folks. Have I ranted enough, Fitz?
Oh, I'm just really getting mesmerized by it. So, sign me up.
I kind of knew I had your vote.
Yeah, you had me from the beginning.
Since I made you a star.
Yeah,
All right, brother. Good to talk.
Again, thanks everyone for your comments. There was one in here that someone said pillowcases. I never thought of that as an option.
Yeah.
So
wow, neither did I.
Yeah, it's always cool to see what other people have as ideas. Just a
do
quick
let
question,
know.
Carl. Are the T-shirts in 2 colors and the hoodies, are they in 2 colors or one?
Hoodies will be in black, white, and grey. I think are the colours available, black, white, and grey. Now, you can nominate. Yes, I think you can nominate. You can either have a hoodie that doesn't have a zip up front, or you can have a hoodie that does have a zip up front. I like the one with the zip up front. It's got nice side pockets. I like that idea. If you don't want a zip in the front, you just want the pullover one with pockets in the front, then I think those ones are I don't know, $7 or $8 cheaper anyway. They're cheaper. Yes, we can do those sorts of pulleys. If you want one with a zip, put zip in there somewhere along with the size. And if you want one that doesn't have a zip, don't put zip in there, and we'll give you one that's just a pullover style. They will be Melbourne grade fleece. They won't be Queensland grade fleece. And anybody who knows in Queensland, lives in Queensland, has bought fleece and then gone to Melbourne thinking they'll be warm wearing it. You'll know what I'm talking about. So these hoodies will be warm. So that's the good part about it. Will be warm. And I'd like to thank my very good mate at the clothing company in Melbourne who's looking after us, because I knew our 30-year friendship was going to come good for a reason somewhere. So, he's
Carl,
really
I'm
helping
just
us
looking
out.
at all the other suggestions here. So now I'm reading phone cases, stubby holders, flags, mouse pads. So people are really going to town with this.
Holy hell.
So yeah,
Coffee
mugs as well. Look, coffee mugs at the bottom.
Yeah, we talked about mugs, and in fact, mugs are great, but they're, once again, really expensive.
Yeah.
It's like $7.50 for the mug, and it's like same again or more for the print. Got to find somebody who can do mugs at a much cheaper price than the people who are quoting us at the moment. Toilet paper, says CPN.
Hang on, take it easy.
That. Should we mention the idea that was thrown to us today in the email, or will we just keep that one to ourselves for the time being?
But just hang on to that. Don't want to overload people too much.
Yeah, good.
There's obviously be time to express all that later.
Yes.
So just wanted to say that someone said flags for protest. This movement doesn't protest because protesting is granting authority to the current system. So when you understand Magna Carta by its true nature, you never protest. This is all about making sure that you stay in honor and peace. Don't give any excuse for any violence to be perpetrated against you. So we pick up our sword with our pens, and our shield is the Magna Carta. We don't go in the streets and put ourselves in as targets, because that's the way the system's designed to crush you. So
but there will come a point where the people have to stand up and go to the streets, or more particularly go to the public buildings.
Exactly. That's an entirely different proposition to a protest.
That's very different to a protest. So we will discuss that difference once everybody is aware of how that situation needs to play out.
That comes in its own time.
Yeah, so don't be disheartened. Don't think just because we're not a protest movement that we're not behind action. There is appropriate action.
There's very strategically, organized and orchestrated, and it's nothing to do with a protest, but it is super effective.
Yeah. So yes, still much to learn in the Magna Carta Learning Centre, folks. Much to learn.
Somehow we've dragged this out to almost 2 hours, Carl. I don't know how that happened.
I know. Shut up, idiots. I mean, really, seriously. God, you just
gotta learn to zip
go
it.
on. All right. Love you, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Beautiful stuff. Thanks, Fitz, and thanks everybody for joining us again tonight. Another Magna Carta Learning Centre next 7:30 next Monday night, live from Singleton at the Cali Hotel. Really looking forward to that show. Really looking forward to spending the week in Singleton. I've never been there before, and looking forward to learning a whole heap of new things and making a whole heap new friends. It's going to be very exciting. Thanks for joining us. Tomorrow night, folks, going to have some interesting things happening on the show. I did have 2 guests lined up. One has said that he can't turn up. One has said he might turn up, and now I've got a third one who's saying, yeah, I'll turn up. So there could be anywhere between 1 and 3 guests tomorrow night. We'll just see what's going to happen. Over the next couple of days, I might be having Wednesday, might be a little strange one. We may not have a show Wednesday night because I need to do some relocation, and it will depend on whether or not I get studios set up in time and all that sort of stuff as to whether or not I get a show Wednesday night. Thursday, be back. Friday's going to be a free-for-all just from home again. And then Singleton, here we come. So it's going to be a big week next week. Sydney the week after. Townsville, we're talking about coming to you. Cairns, we're talking about coming to you. Mackay, we're talking about coming to you. Rockhampton, Yeppoon, we're talking about coming to you. Newcastle, I've talked about. Melbourne, 3 shows, maybe. Stand up if you want us to come down there, and I'll hook you up with the lady who's putting it all together. Tasmania, we have 3 requests for shows in Tasmania. Stand up if you want that to happen. Send me an email, carl@vofhq.com, and I will hook you up with the lady down there who is organising it, and we'll make sure that a show happens in your area. It looks like October. Now, we're making plans for October because, well, you got to keep thinking life's going to move on, but we'll see what happens in October. But that looks like it will happen in October. Melbourne, early October. Tassie, middle of October. And Far North Queensland, end of October. That is the plan at this stage. So look forward to seeing you there. If you've got any interest in going to any of those shows or setting one up for us, then email me, please, carl@vofhq.com, and I'll see what we can organise, or we'll see what we can organise together. Thanks again for your attendance tonight, folks. 2 hours, 35 seconds. Thank you and good night. And if you're going to be on the roads, avoid the dickheads. Please don't be one.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!